Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate giram yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. So yesterday we completed chapter 14, which was titled Gunatraya Vibhaga Yogaha. The seed verse for the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita is actually there in Shloka 22 of the 13th chapter. Purusha prakristho bhunkte prakritijan gunan karanam gunasangosya sadasad yoni janmashu. The Lord is saying in the 13th chapter, the living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the 3 modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. So this particular shloka in the 13th chapter sets the stage for the last 6 chapters, where the focus is going to be on the 3 gunas. So the Lord is saying that once we come into this Prakriti, because of our interaction with the 3 gunas or coming under the influence of the 3 gunas, we experience things that are dual in nature. Good and bad, happiness and distress, wealth, poverty, all of these dualities we experience because the Jivatma comes in contact with material nature. So the soul that is covered by this false ego develops this desire to enjoy things when it comes in contact with the 3 modes. So we go through various kinds of experiences. Even though the soul is spiritual, when the soul interacts with matter and has interacted with matter in previous lives, that consciousness becomes covered. In the sense, it's like that the fire covered by smoke analogy that the Lord uses in chapter 3. So we forget who we really are when we come under the influence of the 3 modes. And the Lord says, Karanam Gunasangasya. That's the Karanam. Gunasangasya, which means we associate with these 3 modes. We allow those 3 modes to dictate what we feel, what we experience, our habits, our attitudes, etc. So it is these 3 modes that are actually described in the chapter 14, Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. So how does this tree grow? This tree of experiences, habits, attitudes, likes, dislikes, Ichcha and Dvesha, the Lord says, desire and hate. What is nourishing all of this? What's nourishing this is the 3 gunas. And because the 3 gunas are nourishing all of this, it becomes the source of bondage. So we use the analogy of the ropes and the 3 primary colors, that when the 3 primary colors are mixed in various quantities, it leads to other colors. So together, this creates the sum total of our experiences in this material cosmos. Therefore, there are unlimited colors, therefore unlimited experiences. And these experiences creates a range of emotions within us. And these range of emotions create ranges of illusions that just continue to captivate us. So you would have noticed that almost every chapter in the Bhagavad Gita begins with the Lord glorifying knowledge. And we said yesterday, knowledge is only considered complete if you are looking at both matter and spirit. If you're only studying matter, that is not complete knowledge. Because that matter is actually acted on by the spirit. So I'm going to take a couple of analogies used by His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu to explain the significance of knowledge. So when you go to the doctor and he prescribes medicines for you, or say he prescribes exercises for you, if you go to a physiotherapist, he will also tell you the importance of those medicines. So if he prescribes to you 6 or 7 different medicines, an ideal doctor will tell you what is the role of each of those medicines. What do they actually do for you? Because perhaps if you know a little bit more about how that medicine is actually going to help you with the cure, then you will become a little bit more committed to the treatment. Similarly, the doctor, a physiotherapist may advise you, these are the things you should do. So if he gives you a set of, say, 5 exercises, he may tell you, this is how the exercises are actually helping you recover from your ill health, from your injury. So a good doctor will tell you what is the reason he is prescribing certain things and what are the benefits of following his instructions. So similarly, in almost all chapters, Krishna talks about hear carefully, touch, hear from me, Arjuna, as I'm getting ready to speak a little bit more. So the importance of knowledge, Krishna himself says, great sages have said that without this knowledge, you cannot get liberation. So knowledge is not restricted just to the spirit soul. Knowledge is a combination of knowledge of matter as well as the spirit soul, because we are in a world of matter. So if you don't understand matter, you can come under its control. If you don't understand Prakriti and how the spirit soul is interacting with Prakriti, or the consciousness is interacting with Prakriti, how are you going to get yourself out of this jail? So Krishna is saying, if you cannot take shelter of me, he's giving you another option. Then take shelter of the knowledge. You may not be convinced that I am the Supreme Lord, but at least take shelter of this knowledge to begin with and implement this knowledge in your personal life so that you can actually experience for yourself the benefits of applying that particular knowledge. So if we want to be saved from the cycle of birth and death, Krishna repeatedly says, hear, Arjuna. Now, at the same time, you could say that if your symptoms subside or disappear, but the doctor has given you a prescription for 10 days, but your symptom subsides in 3 days, should you stop the medication? So even if you're not experiencing the symptoms anymore, or if it is not visible anymore, you still are required to take the medication. So without that knowledge upfront that is provided to you by the sages, great sages, Krishna says, you will not be committed to taking the appropriate actions. Of course, ultimately, Krishna says, take shelter of me. But not everybody is ready to take shelter of Krishna. In those instances, then you have to take shelter of Vedic scriptures, the knowledge that is there for you, that is there to help you achieve moksha. So by taking shelter of this knowledge first, then maybe one day you'll be inspired to take shelter of Krishna. So this principle is repeatedly used, where in the beginning of the chapter, Krishna glorifies the knowledge. In the end of the chapter, he glorifies Bhakti Yoga. And Bhakti Yoga is nothing but taking shelter of him. So if we understand why we have to do what we have to do, then we may do things with greater conviction. Simply understanding the glories of chanting the holy name, maybe we will chant a little bit more seriously. But after you experience the benefits of chanting the holy names, then you're totally committed. In the beginning, you are told that chanting benefits you. And because you are told by a superior authority that chanting is beneficial for you, you decide to follow the instructions because it's coming from a higher authority. But when you experience the benefits of chanting, then you're not going to give it up because you're convinced. So understanding does not necessarily mean comprehension always. Understanding includes remembering the instruction. So just remembering the instruction, you can follow it. You may not necessarily have understood the deeper significance of that instruction. So similarly, on the path of bhakti, one cannot overestimate or underestimate the position of knowledge. So even if we are taking shelter of the Vedic scriptures, Krishna says, you are actually worshipping me, because the Vedic scriptures are not different from me. So philosophy is an integral part of bhakti. Srila Prabhupada says beautifully that religion, if you practice religion without understanding the philosophy, it's just a sentiment, because you are just following certain rituals. So it becomes sentimental in nature. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada also says, on the other hand, if you're only interested in philosophy and not actually practicing it, then it becomes speculation. It could be this, it could be that, maybe this, maybe that. So religion without philosophy is a mere sentiment. Philosophy without religion leads to speculation. So Krishna has said a few times how he is the seed-giving father of all jivatmas, both moving and non-moving. And Krishna has also said, how is this seed coming into Prakriti? Krishna says, I impregnate Prakriti with these jivatmas. He says, I am the seed-giving father. So that means all of us have two qualities. We acquire qualities from the father and we acquire qualities from the mother. Our father is spiritual in nature. Our mother here is matter. So every jivatma has qualities of the mother, Prakriti, and qualities of the Supreme Father, Lord Krishna. So that means we have qualities reflective of Prakriti and qualities reflective of Paramatma. So there is a spiritual side to us, and there is a material side to us, and we need to understand both. Only understanding the spiritual side without understanding the material side first is not a complete realization. So this whole chapter 14, tells you how if we interact too much with the material side, it entangles us. And therefore, how we need to understand how to actually transcend these three gunas. So these three gunas are like three jail cells. You think Mr. Ambani is not in jail cell? He's a crorepati, or I don't know if crorepati even is an accurate depiction of his wealth. He may have a lot of wealth, but he's also in jail. So the only difference is the quality of the jail cell. Some of us are in what is called solitary confinement, which is the worst kind of punishment if you're in jail. There are different categories of jails, right? Even in the material world. For the most abominable type of criminal, they get worse types of confinement than those who probably just committed an ordinary crime. So depending on our past karmic reactions, we are experiencing different kinds of jail cells. But what shouldn't be doubtful at all is that we are all occupying this jail cell. Because we are all under the influence of the three gunas. So from Shloka 14.5, the Lord introduces the three modes, how they are actually very subtle. It is shaping who we are. It is shaping our interactions with others. So it is just an explanation of the interaction between consciousness and matter. And our perceptions and experiences vary depending on the level of consciousness. So Krishna has talked about the characteristics of the three modes, and he gives the analytical characteristics. For example, in Shloka 6, Krishna talks about how Sattva Gun is represented by happiness, purity, charity. But what is the problem with Sattva Gun? What's wrong with Sattva Gun? Sattva Gun binds us, but Sattva Gun also makes you complacent. It makes you comfortable. Everything is going nicely for you in life. Why change what is going well? We're not going to be inspired to change our lives when things are very comfortable. Everything is going nicely. You have good health. Your finances are good. You have a wonderful family. You're enjoying yourself. So the challenge with Sattva Gun, when you're experiencing peace and no anxiety on a material level, is that it makes you complacent. When you're complacent, you don't want to do anything else. You don't want to disturb the situation. Actually, in reality, all of us are looking for that only. We want to reach that stage where nothing bothers us, but in a different mindset. We are thinking about material benefits for us, where we think, okay, if I have enough money, then I can relax. If I marry off my children, I can relax. If I get admission for my son into a good college, I can relax. So that's how we constantly fool ourselves. We think if I do this, I'll be relaxed. If I do that, I'll be relaxed. But then that is illusion. You're always going to get some other problem that comes your way. Just when things are going comfortably, even in spiritual life, problems will come up. Those problems come up just to help you strengthen your faith in the process of practicing bhakti. The other problem of Sattva Gun, His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu says, is that it it could give you a superiority complex. So you are so delighted in your own goodness and in your own superiority that you don't try for anything more. So the mode of passion, Krishna says in Shloka 7, is that it is characterized by karma. Karma here meaning activities. And these activities are your raga, your attachment. And the word Krishna uses is trishna. Trishna means it's like an addiction, an overpowering craving, an addiction to achieve things. So a person who's an alcoholic is free to choose between beer or wine, but he doesn't choose between whether I should drink or not drink. This is Trishna. You're so caught up in what you're doing. You just think activity itself is what is necessary. You're not asking yourself, is this something that I really ought to be doing? Is this something that I ought to be chasing? We are all chasing something, you know? And Chaitanya Charan Prabhu talks about actually, we have created this wonderful illusion of freedom. Because we have so many choices, we think we're free. It makes you feel better when you have so many choices. I can select whatever I want. But that is not freedom. So he was talking about how, you know, a person who is in sales for the first time may make some mistakes. So a novice car salesman will ask you, would you like to buy a car? And it's easy to say no when somebody says, would you like to buy a car? But an experienced car salesman would tell you, so which kind of car would you like? You know, I have all of this variety, you know, a 4-seater, 7-seater. How large is your family? You know, how much do you commute? So an experienced salesman will connect it with your life so he is able to get you to commit to purchasing that car. So when you're given, an experienced car salesman will give you so many options. I can give you this, I can give you that. This is the price range, or that is the price range. So when he gives you so many options, you think, wow, I have so much freedom, I can choose. But you've not asked the fundamental question, do I really need a car? So this is the illusion of freedom, which is the freedom of choice. So the mode of passion makes you feel that you have freedom of so many choices, you know. So Prabhu was saying, you know, just look at the number of TV channels that is there on our whatever, you know, our satellite TV or cable TV. And how do we make a decision to go with which provider? Based on the number of channels or the type of channels. We think, that is freedom. I can sit and watch whatever I want. So many sports channels, so many entertainment channels, so many bhakti channels, so many regional channels. So much to choose from. And when you have so much to choose from, you feel compelled to act. And you fool yourself into thinking that you actually have freedom of choice. But in the process of watching endless amount of TV, you have actually curtailed your freedom. You've become addicted to watching TV. You know how it is, right? You keep surfing channels, changing channels to see, maybe that I can watch a little more. And you're not happy with that channel, then you flip to another channel and you think, okay, let me do this a little. Maybe that is something interesting. So like this, you're constantly trying out things, thinking that you will be happy. What about the mode of ignorance? In the mode of ignorance, we are actually tightly bound by illusion. So Prabhu was saying that he gave a very simple phrase, the modes influence our moods. So the three modes influence the moods within us. So it's like this chapter is telling us that we are not even masters of this body that we are occupying. It's like we've allowed these three modes to control who we are. So we're not in control actually, but we think we are. Now that does not mean that we are powerless. So if we understand this knowledge about how the three gunas is actually influencing us, then we can begin to do something about it, right? So it's our driving skills that becomes important and not the type of car that we're driving. So the better driver you are, it doesn't matter the quality of the car. So we have to learn to be a good driver of this vehicle that we're occupying. So how can you be a good driver of this vehicle? Chaitanya Charan Prabhu says there are two things that are necessary for this. Self-discipline and self-discovery. Actually, Krishna says this in this chapter. So Krishna is saying, observe yourself first. Develop that awareness of which guna you are under the influence of. Then he tells you how to actually transcend the three gunas. So self-discipline without understanding what is the purpose behind that self-discipline is not going to work. But definitely self-discovery is necessary. Understanding how your body operates, understanding how your mind operates, understanding how the three gunas are actually influencing you. So when you buy a new car, you know, you have to adjust to driving to the new car. So those who have purchased a new car suddenly realize that everything feels different. So when you change things in your life abruptly, suddenly things feel different. It feels uncomfortable. It creates fear within you. I'm sure anybody who's driven a brand new car has experienced some fear because you don't want anything to happen to that car. So your driving itself becomes very tentative in the beginning, you know. So each car has its own features and its own limitations. And the driver has to figure that out, what those features are and what those limitations are, and accordingly become adroit at managing that particular vehicle. So self-discovery is understanding what type of car you are occupying. It is discovering which mode of nature is influencing you predominantly. Right. The objective is to become a better person. But to become a better person, it has to begin with self-acceptance first, which is to know that you are not perfect. You have a lot of faults in you. You have a lot of anarthas in you. So this entire process begins with accepting who you are. But to accept who you are, you have to be very observant of yourself. How you respond to situations, how do you respond to people? What kind of thoughts arise in you when different people come into your sight of vision. You know how it is? Sometimes when somebody comes in your sight of vision, immediately you become irritated. You have to ask yourself, why? So self-acceptance is important, because then that allows you to say, this is where I am and this is where I want to go. This is where I want to be. So Krishna has talked about how these three modes are constantly competing with each other to dominate you. You know, so Krishna is saying nothing is still in this world. It's always moving. It's always dynamic. And therefore your responses also have to be dynamic. But your responses can only be dynamic if you develop self-awareness. So we said all three modes are necessary for us to survive. But what is not good is that allowing one mode to completely dictate your life. So there is a time when we have to rest. There is a time for us where we have to act. And there is a time where we have to be good to ourselves and good to others. So in the mode of goodness, one generally thinks before one acts. In the mode of passion, you first act and then you think, what did I do? Whereas in the mode of ignorance, there is no thinking and there is no action. So reflection followed by action in the mode of goodness. Action followed by reflection in the mode of passion. Neither reflection nor action in the mode of ignorance, just illusion. So Krishna uses the word prakasha to talk about sattva. And he uses the word moha when he talks about tamogun. And how these modes actually act on us, Krishna talks about that. After the analytical qualities, the synthesis of the three modes, he talks about both the long-term effects and the short-term effects of these modes. Long-term effects, which is final destination. You are either going to the upper planetary systems, you are going to stay in the middle planetary systems, or you're going to the lower planetary systems, or you're going to the lower species. The long-term impact of these modes on us. Short-term impact is just how we respond to situations. Our character, our behavior, our attitude. So Krishna is talking about both the short-term impacts of the three modes as well as the long-term impacts of the three modes. And then Krishna comes back to the long-term effects of the modes, and I will share that particular shloka, which is in chapter 14. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, Mataji.
All right, thank you. I don't know, for some reason my computer was hanging for a little bit. So in the 18th shloka, the Lord says, those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. This is the long-term effect. And then Krishna says, when one properly sees that in all activities, no other performer is at work than these modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to all these modes, he attains my spiritual nature. So Krishna is saying, develop self-awareness. And then he will also talk about self-discipline. So to observe how these modes are operating on you is to develop self-awareness. And now Krishna is going to talk about, in response to Arjuna's question, so how do you actually overcome these three modes, which is the self-awareness followed by self-discipline. Self-discipline is in response to Arjuna's questions, "O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these three modes? What is his behavior and how does he transcend the modes of nature?" So, what are the characteristics of someone who has transcended these three gunas? What is his behavior? And how did he get there? What is the process that he followed to be able to transcend these three modes? And in response to that, Krishna talks about all of the characteristics that such a person has, the qualities that such a person has. What is his behavior? That is actually in shloka 24 and 25 within this. Characteristics followed by conduct, behavior. And then in 26, he talks about how did that person transcend these three gunas? In response to Arjuna's last question, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So one has to understand what it takes to actually transcend the three gunas. So every desire that arises in you, you have to evaluate that desire. Where is it going to lead you? So that you don't get carried away by your emotions. A lot of us make emotional decisions. Ideally, decisions should be made in a very detached manner. Because desires will constantly urge you to do this and that. And it just keeps coming like waves. You have to learn to resist these waves that come your way. I'm talking about material desires. Yeah. So we have to step back from our desires and emotions and understand actually what is happening. So how do you get to that being what Krishna calls equipoised? Not easily disturbed and distracted. Yeah. See, we cannot deny our emotions. We cannot deny our feelings. But we should not be carried away by our emotions and feelings. That's what Krishna is asking you to do. So emotions is a reality, feelings is a reality. You cannot just wish them away. But you can certainly observe your emotions and ask yourself why you're responding to that situation in a certain way, or why is your mind filled with certain thoughts. So the question is emotion versus reason. So we shouldn't make emotional choices, rather understand the emotions, and because that's what we are all primarily battling with is our emotions, our anxiety, our expectations of ourselves as well as our expectations of others. So Krishna concludes that both by self-observation and devotion, we can transcend the modes. self-observation and self-discipline through the process of practicing Bhakti Yoga. So this is the essence of chapter 14. So understand what problem you're dealing with and decide how you're actually going to tackle that particular problem. So now we're going to come to chapter 15, which is today's chapter. And this is a short chapter. It is called Purushottama Yoga. It is 20 shlokas long. The first few shlokas are a little complicated because Krishna is using an analogy of a banyan tree. But we'll try our best to understand what is Krishna explaining, right? So for those who do not wish to surrender to Krishna, or who have not accepted Krishna as the Supreme Lord, or who are not convinced up until now that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, is there another option to transcend these three modes? If you don't want to practice Bhakti Yoga. So that's what Krishna is going to talk about. So if you cannot take shelter of Krishna, you should take shelter of the knowledge, as we talked about. So before we begin, let's offer our humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So the acronym for today is HOME. Which is our real home? And our residence today is like a hotel. We have to check out someday. We can't stay in this hotel forever, no matter how luxurious some of our hotels may be. So what are the options to get out of this hotel? Who's going to pay the bills and who's going to settle the bills after you decided to exit this hotel? Let's say you don't have the cash. You've stayed here for so long, you can't pay the dues. Who's going to pay those bills? The Supreme Lord. And what is the essence of the Vedas? So in chapter 10, we came across Chatushloke Gita. In this chapter, we are going to come across Trishloke Gita, which is shlokas 16, 17, and 18. It is also considered the summary of all Vedic scriptures in 3 shlokas. So we'll look at those 3 shlokas as well, which is 15.16, 15.17, and 15.18. So are we living, would we prefer to be in a home or a hotel? You know, let's say you've got a luxurious hotel. Obviously, you don't want to leave it. Why would you want to give up luxuries? As I said, one of the risks of being in the mode of Sattva Guna is that everything is working out for you. Why change what is not broken? You know, there's a saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if you're living in luxurious circumstances, why would you want anything different? Well, no matter how luxurious your hotel is, your jail cell is, death is certain. You have to exit it. You'll just keep coming back, maybe to a different hotel next time. And the different hotel could be a different body altogether. That different hotel could be an upper planetary system or a lower planetary system. You don't know. So Krishna is saying, actually your final destination is you want to come back home or you want to go back home. Hence, Prabhupada very brilliantly titled his first magazine that is still being printed today, Back to Godhead, back home, back to Godhead. Our original home is with our Supreme Father. So we want to go back to our original home. We don't want to reside here. We've taken a vacation from God for whatever reason. This vacation has to end sometime or the other. The choice is in our hands. That independence, little bit of independence, Krishna has given us. So let us see how chapter 14 or rather 15 actually begins. So it's a short chapter, so I think it'll be nice if we can read all the shloka. So Purushottama Yoga means the yoga of the Supreme Person. Purusha means enjoyer. Uttama is the topmost. So who is the transcendental enjoyer of everything? The Supreme Lord. That is the meaning of the word Purushottama. So chapter 15 begins with the Lord speaking. The Lord says, "It is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature." What is nourishing all of this desires that you have, that's going in all different directions? It's the three gunas. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. So Krishna is using the analogy of a banyan tree to tell you how tightly you are caught up in this material world. So you have deep roots, and from the various different desires, you are sending more roots to go down. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with a weapon of detachment. What is a strongly rooted tree? Is our endless desires, lust. How can you cut this tree? Krishna is saying, with a weapon of detachment. Thereafter, once you've become detached, thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, which is, you must exit this lusty place that you have created in your mind, reach that place of Vaikuntha. Therefore, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So Krishna is saying, you have to cut these desires with the weapon of detachment and go back to your original position, to the Supreme Lord. But to do that, surrender. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who unbewildered know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Krishna is again repeating the qualifications for you to enter the spiritual world. That supreme abode of mind is not illumined by the sun or the moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Never return to this material world. So once you go back to the spiritual world, don't have doubts. Maybe I'll make the same mistake and come back. No, Krishna has said 2 or 3 times in the Bhagavad Gita, once you come back to him, you will not return. Don't worry. Sometimes even that creates an anxiety for us. What if I go back to Krishna and then somehow forget him and come back? That's also a fear. It's a genuine fear. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. The Lord is taking ownership of you. He's saying, you belong to me. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses. So your 5 gross senses and the 6th sense is the mind. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aroma. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So Krishna has come back to the topic of transmigration, which he talked about in chapter 2. Krishna is saying, all of your vasanas you're carrying over from your previous life causes you to take a body again and again and again. And Krishna is using the analogy of the air that carries aroma. So Srila Prabhupada says, if air is flowing over a field of roses, then you're going to smell pleasant aroma. If that same air is traveling over a garbage dump, then you're carrying that aroma. So the consciousness is associating with good and bad, and hence that consciousness acquires many, many, many layers of coverings, some good and some bad, depending on where the air is flowing over. That causes you to reincarnate again and again. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So Krishna is saying here, there's no guarantee that you're taking a human form. Your ear, eye, nose, and tongue may be very different. If you've occupied a body of a worm or a butterfly or a tiger or a cockroach, he thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So depending on the type of body that you acquire, you're enjoying a particular set of sense objects. Krishna likes the word mudha a lot. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So Krishna has come back to the topic of knowledge. The endeavoring transcendentalists, transcendentalist means anybody who's pursuing a spiritual path. It need not necessarily refer only to Bhakti Yoga. So the transcendentalists includes the Karma Yogis, the Jnana Yogis, the Dhyana Yogis, and the Bhakti Yogis. So the endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. So as your consciousness is elevated, your spiritual vision becomes clear. So in one of the classes we were discussing, how do you make decisions in a very clear manner such that your mind is not agitated by the choices that you're given. It is easier to make decisions when your consciousness is elevated because you're not agitated by desires. anymore. That's what Krishna is referring to here. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. So you can see how life operates, and therefore you don't become trapped by the three gunas. Every situation is a challenge to constantly step back and see what is happening to you. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. So the reason we experience anxiety and frustration is because we are too close to the problem. We are entangled in the problem and have become part of the problem, which is why Krishna frequently talks about detachment. Detachment means stepping back from the situation and analyzing it without emotions. Very difficult to do. Very difficult to do. But it can be done with practice. The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me. So Krishna is again talking about his opulence. And the splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire are also from me. I enter into each planet, and by my energy, they stay in orbit. Krishna is explaining how such heavy objects like these planets are just floating like balls of cotton in space. The answer is Krishna's energy has pervaded each planet, causing them to stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. So Krishna is saying the taste that comes in all the vegetables and fruits is because of moonlight. So we may think only the sun is helping the plants grow, but the moon also has a significant role to play in the form of the taste of the vegetables, the juice of the vegetables. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities. And I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuff. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Why have you forgotten your previous lives? That's because Krishna wanted you to forget. If he wanted you to remember, you'll remember. So both remembrance and forgetfulness is coming from Krishna. Knowledge is also coming from Krishna. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Krishna is saying the purpose of studying the Vedic scriptures is to know that I am the Supreme Lord. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta and I am the knower of the Vedas. Understanding the Vedantas is good, but understanding the person who's compiled the Vedanta is better. You can have a relationship with him. And now, 16, 17, and 18 is the Trishloke Bhagavad Gita, or a summary of all Vedic scriptures. The essence of all Vedanta is there in these three shlokas. Shloka 16. There are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible. And in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So no matter how perfect we think we are in this material world. Krishna is saying we are all fallible. So the only perfect beings are there in the spiritual universe. And of course, the pure devotees of the Lord who are here in the material universe, who have come as agents of the Supreme Lord. So this is the Nitya Baddha and Nitya Siddha. If you are occupying this material universe, you are considered a Nitya Baddha. If you're already there in the spiritual universe, Krishna says you are Nitya Siddha. Besides these two, which two? The Nitya Baddha and the Nitya Siddha. There is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them as Paramatma. So the three Vishnus that we talked about are the three Vishnus that are maintaining this entire material cosmos. So even Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma come under the influence of the three gunas. But Lord Vishnu is not under the influence of any of the three gunas. So who's operating all of this material universe? The three Vishnus. The three Vishnus, the first Vishnu, Mahavishnu, creates the universe. The second Vishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, goes into each of the universes to impregnate them with living entities. And Kshirodakshai Vishnu then enters every single atom as Paramatma. Whoever knows me, sorry, the 18th shloka. Did we do 17? Yeah. So the Trishloka Gita, the first one is Nitya Baddha and Nitya Siddha. The second essence of the Vedantic scriptures is there is a Supreme Lord who's maintaining everything. And the last of the Trishloka is, because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person, Parabrahman. So Krishna is saying this is the essence of the Vedic scriptures. There are people who come into this material universe because of their desire or envy of the Lord. There is a much larger population in the spiritual universe. They are considered infallible. And then there is the Supreme Lord. And the Lord concludes by saying, for those of us who are in this material universe, the scriptures celebrate the Supreme Lord as transcendental, as the greatest. So these three shlokas, 16, 17, and 18, is the Trishloke Bhagavad Gita. It's also a summary of all Vedic scriptures in three shlokas. So I hope all of you are relieved. You don't have to go study the Vedic scriptures. You know the essence of the Vedic scriptures. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. So Krishna is saying, if you know who I am, if you've accepted me as your Supreme Master, in my mind, you know everything already. And because you know that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, Krishna says, what does such a person do? He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So Krishna is concluding again that the Jivatma who has accepted him as a Supreme Lord, and because he understands that Krishna is the master, he begins to worship his master. He begins to serve his master. And Krishna says, such a person is wise, and whatever activities that you're performing, you will achieve perfection. So now we'll go back to the slides. So the very first shloka is the banyan tree analogy. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Urdhvamulama Dakshakam Ashwatham Prahuram Avyayam Chandam Siyasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. So the real tree, Krishna is saying, is in the spiritual world. Our real desire, our genuine, original desire is to serve the Lord. But we have become entangled with the reflection of the tree in the water. So much so, we have forgotten the real tree. How have we become entangled with the reflection of the tree? By nourishing the three gunas. The more we nourish these three gunas, the more we will tend to forget the Supreme Lord. And therefore, we are engaged with something that is not real. And this is what is called Maya, illusion. That we have accepted this body to be permanent, that we've accepted our relationships with our loved ones to be permanent. We think we are the owners and proprietors of every little thing that we have accomplished in our life. Most of us don't think of death at all until it comes as a warning shot sometimes. Some of us has no warning. We just have to give up our body and go. So Krishna is saying, you are struggling so hard in life for what? You are serving an illusory master. Your real master is in the spiritual world. But you have chosen to become a slave of Maya. And Krishna is saying, better you become my slave or my servant, because at least you will have benefits by doing so, by surrendering to him. So how to free ourselves? We need to know our correct designation. Our correct designation is that we are spirit souls first. Spirit souls occupying this material body. Detachment through attachment. How do you develop detachment through attachment? You detach yourself from all things material by attaching yourself to serving Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, and Krishna. And by this, you can give up your sense of proprietorship of everything that is there in your life. So Krishna talks about the difference between the spiritual world and the material world. So the option for us is home or hotel. You want to be in this material world or you want to go back to the spiritual world? That's the option Krishna is giving you. But you have to settle your bills in the material world. Who can settle your bills? Oh, Krishna can settle your bills just by becoming his devotee. You don't have to worry about paying off your debts because he wipes it out. He's the owner of this hotel also. He's the owner of the home. He's owner of the hotel. So the owner can wipe out your debts. So what's there to worry? Just follow Krishna's instructions. Surrender to him. Become his devotee. What is so difficult? Actually, I'm repeating what Srila Prabhupada says. I'm not asking that question because I know it is not as easy as it sounds. But Prabhupada always would say, what's so difficult? What is the difficulty? Prabhupada would ask his devotees and his disciples. What's the difficulty in following simple instructions? Nadbhashayate suryo, natadbhashayate suryo, na shashanko na pavakah, yat gatva na nivartante, tadhama paramam mama. Krishna is saying there is no electricity, there is no sun or moon in the spiritual world. So how is the spiritual world lit up? By the light coming from the Lord's body, everything is lit up. There is no sun or moon in the spiritual world. And Krishna is saying, if you come there, you don't want to come back to the material. You will not come back to the material world. So Krishna is helping you re-establish your identity here again, which he did in chapter 2 for Arjuna. Mamai vamsho jiva loke. He's saying, you belong to me. We are fragmental parts of Krishna and we are separated from him. And being separated from him, we've become stuck in this material world. So Krishna is taking ownership of you. He's saying, you belong to me. Because you belong to me, don't you want to come back to me? How long do you want to go on vacation in this hotel? Well, if you don't want to exit this hotel, Krishna says, this is bondage. If you don't want to come back to the spiritual world, you'll have to follow this cycle. Mamaivamsho jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatanaha, manasastani indriyani, prakritisthani karshati. Krishna is saying, actually, you are there with me in the spiritual world. But because you chose to be separated from me, you are struggling. Struggling with what? Your 6 senses, including the mind. And because you've come in contact with the 3 gunas, you have been conditioned over many, many lifetimes. Many, many, many lifetimes has caused you to forget Krishna. Shariram yadavapnoti yachap utpramastishvaraha grihitvaitani samyati vayur gandhani vashayat. So Krishna is saying, all your previous births, all your previous experiences, all of your unfulfilled desires, you're just carrying from one body to another, as the air carries the aroma. And this cycle you continue. So Krishna is giving one final warning to you. Are you sure you want to be in this hotel? Can I tempt you to come back to the spiritual world? And Krishna is saying, everything is decided by your desires and your past activities. So he is asking you to be trained up in this knowledge so that you can see what the real situation is on the ground. And if you're clever and if you're intelligent, you'll want to get out of this messy situation of birth, death, old age, and disease repeatedly. And Krishna is emphasizing for us, you are not in control, I am in control. Everything is going on because of me. Gamavishya cha bhutani dharayam yaham ojasa Pushnami chaushadih sarva samo bhutva rasatmakaha. So it's because of Krishna's energy, everything is taking place. It's because Krishna is residing within you as Paramatma, you are able to act. Because in order for you to act, the Lord has to sanction. So without the Lord, nothing happens. But everything is triggered by your desire. So Aditya Gatam Tejo, he's the splendor of the sun. Gama Vishya Chabhutani, maintainer of all the planets. Pushnami Chaushadih Sarva. Chaushadih. Supply the juice of life to all vegetables. Vaishvanara, the fire of digestion. Prana Panasamayuktaha, Pachamyannam. So the Lord says, He's actually helping digest your food. How? Through your movement of the air in your body, with the combination of the fire of digestion. He's the maintainer of the mind and the Jivatma. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyo vedanta krit veda vedeva chaham. Krishna is saying, I am seated in you. And because I am seated in you as Paramatma, I make you forget. I make you remember. I give you knowledge. As a matter of fact, the entire Vedas, I am to be known. Why? Vedanta krit veda videva chaham. Krishna says, I am the one who compiled the Vedas. I am the one who actually knows the Vedas. Therefore, by knowing me, you know all the Vedas automatically. You don't have to study the Vedas separately. So by becoming a devotee of Krishna, you are automatically a great Brahman, a very learned Brahmana. Krishna is saying he is the maintainer of the soul. So this is the Trishloke. Dva vimau purushau loke ksharas chakshara evacha ksharas sarvani bhutani kuthastho kshara uchyate. Two classes of being, kshara and akshara. Fallible and infallible. In the material cosmos, we are all fallible, which means we are full of faults. In the spiritual world, nobody has any faults. They are perfected beings, nitya siddhas. What's the definition of fallible and infallible? The fallible are those who want to enjoy separately from Krishna. When you want to please yourself, we said that is called lust. When you want to please Krishna, that is called love. So those who want to satisfy their own desires are considered fallible. Because you think you can enjoy without Krishna. And therefore you always stay in this material world. The infallible, they know that happiness cannot exist without Krishna. They never want to give up Krishna, and therefore they never leave the spiritual world. They are always there with the Lord. Uttamah purushastvananyah paramatmeti udahritaha yo lokatrayam avishya bhibartid avyaya ishvaraha. And then, besides this fallible and infallible, there is the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is not only in the spiritual world, but through his plenary expansions and energies is maintaining the material cosmos. It is said that the Lord never leaves the spiritual world. He's always there, enjoying himself with the Nitya Siddhas. But at the same time, he is here with us also. How? Through his various inconceivable energies, through his expansions. Yasmat ksharam atitoham Aksharaadapi chottama atosmi loka vedecha pratitah purushottamaha. So the title of this chapter is coming from the Lord's own reference to himself as Purushottama. Because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. Not Brahman, Parabrahman. So we've reached the conclusion and end of today's chapter. So chapter 15, Purushottama Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Person. So let us say you don't want to take shelter of Krishna. Krishna says, then take shelter of the knowledge that is there in the Vedic scriptures. So if you're entangled in this huge banyan tree, and you're entangled in the reflection of what that tree has to offer, everything looks lovely. The twigs, the leaves, these are all various desires. They just keep branching out and branching out and branching out. And they're unlimited, like this banyan tree. So if you cannot take shelter of Krishna, Krishna is saying, then you take shelter of the Vedic scriptures. With the help of this Vedic scriptures, they act as your GPS system. They help you escape this material world because you'll come to the conclusion that the purpose of the Vedic scriptures is to understand who is the Supreme Lord and what's your relationship with him. So the single word summary for today, or the acronym, of course, the other acronym was HOME. The single word summary is Global Positioning System. How do you anchor yourself to go back, to go to the right destination? Follow the Vedic scriptures. That's your escape plan. That is, if you cannot surrender to Krishna, then take the shelter of the knowledge that he himself has compiled. And of course, the object of all of that knowledge is Krishna himself. Now, tomorrow, in chapter 16, which is titled Daivashura Sampada Vibhaga Yoga, Krishna is going to say, you are in this jail cell. I've told you there are two kinds of personalities, Nitya Baddha and Nitya Siddha. But even among the Nitya Baddhas, there are two kinds of inmates. There are those who possess divine qualities, and there are those who possess demoniac qualities. So Krishna is going to tell us tomorrow, be careful who you spend time with. You do understand you're in this jail, right? If you want to exit this jail, you must know who your inmates are, who to spend time with, who to avoid. But then there is a deeper problem there. What if the demon and divine exist within you simultaneously? Then you have to fight your demoniac nature so that the divine can win out. But in our current situation, our tendency is to focus on the demoniac nature of others and think that you yourself are very divine. We exaggerate the demoniac tendencies of others, just as we overinflate our own divine aspects. In reality, you're actually fighting yourself. So how do you overcome your own demoniac tendencies? That's what we're going to discover. So both the divine and demoniac reside within you. How do you make sure that the divine wins over the demoniac? That's a constant struggle for all of us. So that we will pick up in tomorrow's chapter. So today's chapter summary is home. So you want to go home or you want to stay in this hotel? That's the option that Krishna is giving you. And he's telling you the consequences of staying in this hotel, which is transmigration. So you want to associate with reality, or you want to be caught up in the reflection of that reality? So we have to be free of this illusion, this Maya. The difference between the spiritual world and the material world, transmigration. Who is maintaining everything in this material cosmos? Krishna is. He is both the protector and the maintainer of everything, your body, mind, and soul. And then two kinds of personalities, the Nitya Baddhas and Nitya Siddhas. Nitya Baddhas reside in this material cosmos. The Nitya Siddhas are there eternally associating with the Lord. And beyond the Nitya Baddhas and Nitya Siddhas is a Supreme Lord. And if you want to go back to him, Krishna tells you how. You can go back to him. So it's a very sweet chapter. This chapter 15, it's a short chapter, just 20 shlokas. But Krishna is giving you the secret of going back to the spiritual world. And at the same time, telling you, if I were you, I wouldn't want to stay in this hotel for much longer. If I were you, I would make a plan and get out of here as soon as I can. So that's what an intelligent person would do. So Krishna is saying, this weapon of detachment is what you need to develop to break free of the strongly rooted banyan tree of unending desires and lust. So Krishna has given all of us a solution. The choice is ours, whether we want to take it up or not. Do we want to follow Krishna's instructions? That's up to us. That much freedom Krishna has given you. That much independence Krishna has given you. He's not going to force you. But he's ready to settle your bills if you want to exit this hotel. He's ready to settle your dues. But you should be ready for that. So some of us will pack up our suitcase and leave, and some of us will still stay here, unfortunately. Vancha kalpadarupyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha anantakoti vaishnava vrindakim jai. Jagatguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Gurudeva ki jai.